Hey guys, it's Will. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing well. If you are new to the channel, welcome and thank you for finding me. I hope you dig this video. Let's jump right into it. It is October. It is one of my favorite times of year as a fan of movies because I get to watch horror films. I actually started watching horror movies in September of this year because I was like way too excited to get to my Halloween watching because I made myself like a big long list of Halloween movies that I needed to watch this year. And then when I looked at it, I was like, I'm not going to have enough time in October to watch all these movies. I got to cheat and start early. So just the other day, I rewatched Halloween 2. And I was really blown away by the blocking, the visual design, the cinematography, directing, whatever, the kind of combination of all those things, whatever you want to call it. There are two sequential scenes in this film that are really freaking incredible, that are mostly just one continuous shot for each scene. There's a couple inserts in one of the scenes. I just wanted to kind of take those out of the film and talk about them here and just talk about why I loved this section of the movie so much. This is really why I made this channel, because I wanted to focus on like small details of movies or like specific things about films that I really love, rather than on my other channel where I do like these big sweeping kind of reviews of like entire movies or Blu-ray releases or like whatever. So I'm really excited to talk about this. I love this movie. I love the Halloween series. I love John Carpenter, who was the producer and the writer on this film. Obviously, he's the co-writer, and he co-wrote and directed and produced the first one. This movie was directed by Rick Rosenthal, and then also very much worth mentioning that the cinematographer was Dean Cundey. So I don't know whose idea it was to shoot this movie the way they did. There's a lot of Steadicam in this movie, and this is early Steadicam. So Steadicam was first used in like commercial films in 1976. I think it was invented in 75. So the first movies to use Steadicam it was like a Woody Guthrie biopic, and then like Marathon Man and I think Rocky were like first like three early movies to use a lot of Steadicam. So 1978, Halloween comes out, and there's prominent Steadicam work in that film. So that was a very early example of the use of Steadicam in like commercial American cinema. This movie came out in 1981. So it's still like very early in the use of Steadicam. Like The Shining, which came out in 1980, is known for a lot of innovation with Steadicam. And like they had to invent like a new rig for that movie, because it's typically in Steadicam the camera is mounted like high, right? So but Kubrick wanted shots that were like going along the floor in that film, so they had to invent like a different rig where the camera was at the bottom of it so that they could get that kind of movement, gliding movement, like really close to the floor. So this is an era in cinema in which there's a lot of innovation in Steadicam. If you don't know what Steadicam is, it's essentially like a rig that kind of attaches to a body that then you hold with your hands. It's like this metal pole that's kind of like balanced so that you can walk with the camera and it's really smooth. So it doesn't create like shaky movement and chaos and stuff like that. So you can create like really beautiful cinematography, really incredible visual design with smooth moving cameras. So I'm going to talk about the use, really specifically kind of about the use of Steadicam in this film. There are two pieces of terminology that I want to just talk about really quickly in the intro here before we get into looking at the clips. The first one is key framing. Also worth mentioning, I am not a director. And so I've studied these things. I took directing classes when I was in film school, but my focus was screenwriting. So this is just terminology that I learned through taking classes in film school. And then I was on sets. Like I acted. I have a background in theater. So I acted in like a lot of short films that my friends made, including stuff that like played at festivals and stuff like that. So I've been on set, but I'm not a director, right? So this is like my kind of perspective on these things as like a writer, a fan of cinema, someone who's been on sets, whatever. Key framing is when you have a long continuous shot, Steadicam shot, crane shot, whatever, and it moves from like setup to setup essentially, so that you have like, here's like three characters here, and then we're going to move to this other set of characters and stop and focus on them, right? So it's like you have framed images within the movement of the camera. Basically, I'm going to talk about this by example, so it'll be a lot clearer, I promise. And then motivated camera movement is the other thing I want to mention. Motivated camera movement is when something within the frame motivates the movement of the camera so that it's kind of natural and organic and very kind of fluid within the scene. So, and I swear, like I said, I'm going to talk about all these things and tell you exactly what I mean by example when we get into the clips. So this is the first scene I want to talk about. And like I said, these scenes are continuous in the film, so they're back to back. So this is a scene outside of a house, clearly, and the guy we have here is a newscaster. And there's this really interesting device in this film of like the news, not just live newscaster at events, but also like people listening to the radio, people watching TV. It's almost like this Greek chorus that's like informing the audience as to important context, events, themes, things of that nature. So we have this newscasting here, and this is very much a key frame, right? This is a framed shot. The guy who is the newscaster is right in the middle of the shot, and you have people flanking him on either side, and you have this very nice kind of setup. This is also a very cinematic use of space, because look at all the depth that you have here. You have these people over here on the left who are like the camera crew. They're really, really up against the camera. Then you have the newscaster and the woman handing him the microphone. Then there's another guy in a vest kind of behind them, and then behind that you have other like spatial planes essentially. So you have all of this movement like in this big long stretch going all the way back to this house. So it creates this kind of dynamic sense of like being somewhere in a place at a time, but also creates kind of movement, chaos, things that play into thematically, I think, and in terms of the narrative into the film really well. And I'll talk about that as well in a second. So let's see what happens here. So this guy's doing a little newscast for him. As the camera's completely stationary, like this could be just a shot on a tripod, right? And he's kind of giving us the context of the scene. Now the camera starts to move a little bit, but then he starts to move. So we're moving with him. So this is motivated camera movement. We move with that guy, and we move from one keyframe to the next one, right? So we had that initial keyframe with the newscaster. Now this woman is a reporter, right? So we've moved over to them, and now we're on this kind of frame of them talking. Now look in the background, you can see a door. There are people moving in and out of that door, right? So like I said, I think this plays into the kind of the narrative and the themes of the film and stuff like this. All of these people moving around in this space creates this sense of kind of chaotic energy and confusion and anxiety, right? This movie all takes place in one night, and it's actually the continuation of the same night the first movie takes place in. So there is this sense of anxiety, chaos, and confusion because this is all happening in real time, and information and events are just flying at people, and they're trying to deal with them. And I think the Steadicam lends itself really well to that, of giving this sense of like real-time continuity because of the fluidity of the cinematography, but also the way they've stacked the planes in here with all these people kind of moving in all these places, and like we're moving in and out of the depth, and we're moving laterally, and it just creates this overall sense of, I think, like movement, chaos, confusion, and kind of a need to respond to the moment. So they're talking here. This is our second keyframe of this shot right now. Now this is motivated camera movement. She moves, and the camera moves with her. So it's totally natural and organic to the scene, right? Now we come over here. Now, I really like this because what we're doing here is we're picking up another group of characters, right? Who are these cops? What we could have done is she could have just walked off and we could have followed these cops. But instead, she stops and talks to them. So it's almost like she's handing us off to the cops. And now we start to move into the depth that we've established here along this sidewalk here. Oh, and something else. Actually, I want to mention this because this is a really small thing, but I love it. Okay. So there are stairs, right? See where she's standing? Up this path here, there's a couple steps, right? Now watch what the camera does here. It swings out from the path and away because the camera operator is walking up the little grassy hill of the yard because they don't want to have to try to navigate steps while they're trying to frame a shot, right? Stuff like that I think is really interesting to look for when you look at like Steadicam work and other types of moving camera. Like, how are they working around the physical obstacles in the scene to get the shot? Okay, so they come up here, and this is going to be our next keyframe. This almost reminds me of Jaws. There's that amazing scene in Jaws where the cops and like the mayor and like those people are on that ferry, and it's all like one shot of people, just like the ferry's moving and the people are moving, and you get these really amazing keyframes. And this shot kind of reminds me of that. And so this is our next keyframe. We have the paramedic, we have Dr. Loomis, and we have these two cops. And this is a spoiler. If you've never seen Halloween 2, it's actually really more of a spoiler for the first Halloween film, because this is someone learning something that happened in the first film. So this cop over here on the right is the father, again, spoiler, of one of the victims from the first Halloween movie. But because the first Halloween movie unfolds kind of in real time, he hasn't learned yet that she was a victim. So he's learning that right now. Now, here's where you get into something that I think is really well done. Okay, so this is a cutaway, right? They could have done this whole scene in one shot, but instead it cuts to basically the father looking at his dead daughter, right? This is a separate shot. This is not the Steadicam shot. And we cut to him. So why are they doing this? Emotion, right? Rather than having this kind of the distance of the Steadicam and the fact that it's taking in all of these things in this place and this chaos and this movement, we cut away from that to a stationary static shot of basically just reverse shot, the dead daughter, and then him looking at it, because it's focusing on the real human emotion taking place in that moment. And when you have a set, steady shot like that, you're taking away from the kind of voyeuristic sense that you get from Steadicam. But then we cut back into the Steadicam shot after, and obviously, like, this is so sad. Like, you don't want to, like, have this in the chaos. And one of the other things I think is interesting about this is that they very clearly wanted to do a lot of Steadicam, moving camera, fluidity of movement and motion and stuff in this movie, but they did not allow the philosophy of wanting to do that to get in the way of just the nuts and bolts craft of, like, we really need inserts in this scene, so let's just shoot him and stick him in there, rather than being dogmatic about only Steadicam in this scene. So this is the Steadicam shot again, right? And again, in the background, look, there's people moving in the house, right? So the paramedics are walking away, and then we close in on, this is kind of a new key frame, right? Because they're collapsing as the body is being taken away by the paramedic, and we're creating a new key frame, so reframing to fit these people in. And in the background, in that doorway, there's movement, like stuff is happening in there, and there's a little bit of a crowd behind them there. So all of these extra pieces create this dynamic sense of being in a place at a time, and create these spatial planes that create a more interesting movement, right? And you're like, most people are probably not watching this movie thinking about all this, right? But it does catch your eye, and it does go to your brain, and it does register that this is not a typical boring shot. And they could have shot this scene, like, you could take every single key frame in this scene and just shoot it individually as a shot with a camera on a tripod, rather than using the Steadicam to move from keyframe to keyframe. But this creates a much more dynamic sense of being there, and I think it reiterates the kind of the feeling of that they were going for with this narrative, of this sense of urgency and speed. So here's another keyframe. We have to reframe as that cop exits to get these two guys. And now look, behind Dr. Loomis, there's these guys. So there's so much movement going on right now, because these two guys are walking towards us. We're walking away from them, right? And then the paramedics are behind them, I think, bringing out another body coming towards us. And then these people on the side are kind of like moving around. Now, this is interesting for me to think about here, because did the Steadicam operator just walk backwards down those steps? Or did they swing around to go down the hill? I don't know. Well, you can watch it on your own and tell me what you think in the comments. And then we get this, another keyframe, and look, reporter in the background, right? So we're back to one of the people who we started with in this scene. So it's like this kind of full circle thing of, we start on the street with the reporters, we move up into the house, or onto the kind of like near the porch with the cops and the paramedics and stuff, and then we come back out onto the street and the reporter is there again. So it's like closing the circle of the scene in this really perfect way that creates this sense of completeness, right? Like, we've started, we've moved in, we've learned information, we're coming back out, we're planting ourselves on the street again, and again we have the reporters who are like kind of like the Greek chorus, the witnesses to this, like the people who are providing the audience with information. And look at, she's like actively listening to them, and we know that this information is going to filter back to the media sources that we're hearing in this film, like the reporters, the radio, the TV, and stuff like that. Now, this is the very next shot. I didn't cut anything here, right? It just goes directly into this shot, and this shot is freaking incredible. Okay, there's a lot of awesomeness in this shot. So, I mean, we're just looking at like kind of like a little side street here with some parking. There goes an ambulance. And, okay, let me talk about the ambulance real quick. We just saw a scene in which they were loading bodies into an ambulance. So that very well may be the same ambulance. That is such an amazing tiny detail to just kind of plant this sense in the back of your brain of the continuity of space and time in this film, of things happening in real time. That ambulance is probably only a few. This is Haddonfield, Illinois, in the world of the Halloween films, is a small town. This is maybe just like 5 minutes later, 3 minutes later even. We don't really know. But that's such a good detail of having the ambulance go by like that. You don't need to add details like that, but when you do, it really enhances the experience of the film. Okay, so we pull back here, and here's our motivated camera movement. So the first piece of motivation is really the ambulance. The ambulance comes by, we start pulling back. Then we pick up this kid in the cowboy hat. Now, this kid is listening to the radio, and the radio is broadcasting news about the murders that took place in this town on this night, right? And basically what we were just seeing in the previous scene. And we see in that scene the media listening in, the reporters. So there's this sense of continuity across, but also it's providing us context and information. Now, we're going to pick up these two women here. I love the way this shot works, right? Because we move with this kid with the boombox, and then when that person crosses the street, we pick up these two women, and then they come towards us, right? And the camera's backtracking. So it's interesting to think, like, is the camera operator walking backwards right now? Or are they walking sideways and they have the camera rigged in a certain way? Or I don't know, it's interesting. So they stop at this car. So we're back on the car. So again, there's this sense of like completeness and like moving in full circles. And if you haven't seen the film, or if you haven't seen it in a while, there's this woman here on the left is one of the characters in the film. She's a nurse at the local hospital, and that's her friend. And her friend is like, "Can you take me home?" And she's like, "I really got to get to work." And she's like, "Please, you said you would drive me home." And she's like, "All right, fine, but I'm going to be late to work and I'm going to get in trouble." And she's like, "Okay, whatever." So motivated camera movement, right? What just happened there? Why did the camera pull back? Car door opens. So that's our motivation for and you don't even really notice it. It's so organically integrated into the scene. That's why we're pulling back. That's what gives us the motivation to move away from them. Okay. And I just like, there's so much background action. All these people. So here's a cut. So this is actually another shot here, because you see we reversed. So we were on the other side of the car and now we're on this side of the car. So these are separate shots now. And so here goes the car. And we're camera motivated by them driving by, and who do we see again? It's our friend in the cowboy hat with the radio. Now this is really good too, because remember, we opened the scene on this person, so naturally you'll be thinking, okay, the two characters who we're following have driven away. This is just kind of bringing closure to the scene by showing this person walk by again. But in a slasher film, in a Halloween movie, in a horror film, never waste an opportunity to get suspense and surprise and potential terror out of a scene. So this person's walking along, listening to their radio, and they walk into somebody who happens to be Michael Myers. Now we start following Michael Myers from behind. And this, like, we know who Michael Myers is. We've already seen him kill, like, at least a couple people in this movie so far, right? At least one. Or two or three. I'm trying to remember the body count at this point in the film. But now threat, right? Michael Myers is walking down a street with other people on it. And it's Halloween, so they don't know, this weird guy in a jumpsuit and a mask shouldn't be trusted. Cops come by, a little bit of sense of danger for Michael. But there's all these just people running around, having reverie. Okay, and this is where we get... So... adding Michael Myers to the scene gives us this sense of dread and suspense and terror, because he's walking down the street amongst the general populace, right? But if nothing else happened in the scene, if we just saw him walking away, right, you might not have a sense of terror in continuity with the events of the film. What is so brilliant about this to me is that is the sign for the hospital. And we know that Laurie Strode, who is Jamie Lee Curtis, right, from the first film, was in this film, has been taken to the hospital. We've just met a nurse from the hospital. So the events of the film are kind of starting to collapse around this hospital. And now we see Michael Myers walking in the direction of the hospital. And I included just the first shot of the very next scene here. Because, whoops, there's my Fiend to Cinema. Is it too quick for you to see it? Yeah, I think I included a little frame that was so quick you can't even really see it. Let me see if I can. Yeah, okay. The next shot is at the hospital. Okay, so we had this buildup of, like, here's a nurse. We see the ambulance going to the hospital. We see the bodies being taken to the hospital. We know that Laurie Strode is in the hospital and that she's still alive. So, like I said, the film is kind of collapsing around the hospital. Then we see Michael Myers walking by the hospital scene, and then the glory of editing, we are at the hospital and we're like, oh crap, it's about to pop off. So, and then I get my little Fiend du Cinema. You always gotta throw that in there, right? So anyway, I really geeked out to Halloween 2 watching it. It was like 2 nights ago, and how awesome the camera work is, the blocking and stuff like that. And those two scenes really stood out to me because they're kind of back to back. I thought that would be like a cool little study in talking about these things. So my name is Will. I hope you liked this video. Let me know in the comments if there's any other kind of movies you want me to talk about in this way, or like what you like about this film, what you don't like about the film, what your favorite Halloween films are, and all that stuff. Thank you for watching, as always, and we'll see you next time.